All right, it's all yours.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Corporation of the Township of Bonnechere Valley public meeting on Tuesday, June 20th, 2023 at 5:20 p.m. We are meeting in the council chambers and Zoom conferencing. The applicant is Doris Smith, being 5:23 p.m. This meeting held by council under section 34 of the Planning Act is now called to order. Can I get an approval of the public meeting minutes from May 23rd, 2023, please? Moved by Tracy, seconded by John. Are there any errors or omissions? All in favor? Thank you. Members are to state any pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof before items are discussed. Are there any declarations this evening?
Nope.
I see none. This public meeting is to consider an amendment to the Township of Bonnechere Valley zoning bylaw 2022-042, part of Law 25, concessions 11 and 12 in the geographic township of Sebastopol, located at 165 Settlers Way. The purpose of the amendment is to rezone 2 parcels of land to permit the creation of a waterfront residential lot on Lake Clear. The effect of the amendment is twofold. First, to rezone a 0.55 hectare parcel that represents the back portion of the proposed 1 hectare severed lot from rural to limited service residential to match the existing limited service residential zoning of the front portion of the proposed lot. As a result, the severed lot will be zoned entirely as limited service residential. Second, to rezone a 24.3 hectare parcel that represents the retained lands of the severance application from limited service residential and rural to rural exception 26 to require a minimum 130 meter setback for a septic system from the high water mark of Lake Clear. All other provisions of the zoning bylaw shall apply, and the land zoned as environmental protection are not affected. The public meeting is a requirement of the Planning Act. In accordance with the Planning Act, notice must be given at least 20 days before the public meeting is held. Would the clerk please report on the circulation of notice?
On May 17, 2023, the notice was circulated to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. It was mailed to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. The notice was also published in the Eagle Leader, and it appeared in the May 17, 2023 edition, and notice of the meeting was also posted on the township's website.
Thank you. The 20-day notice having been given, I now declare the meeting properly constituted to transact its business. Would the clerk please report on any written comments received?
There wasn't any.
Thank you. Do we have anybody on Zoom or in the chambers?
Yes,
okay.
People in the chambers.
Do any members of the public wish to speak to the amendment? Does the owner or agent for the property wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Brian Whitehead. I'm with JP2G Consultants. I'm joined here tonight with Brianna Kenny, Pam Harrington, and Andrew Smith. Pam and Andrew are the children of Doris Smith, and we're the agent for this application and the land severance application that previous to that. I'll just be brief. The purpose of this zoning bylaw amendment is a recommendation from our planning report to implement the results of a water quality impact assessment that was carried out by an environmental consulting firm by the name of Mikkelski Nielsen. We were working with a fellow named Gord Nielsen, and Brianna was out on the site visit with him during the soil testing. And the results of that study concluded that the property had the type of soils, the B horizon soils, that were well suited for mitigating septic effluent in order to avoid potential adverse impacts on the lake. And the recommendation was that the septic system would be constructed on the retained land with any future development for a dwelling at a distance of 130 meters back from the shoreline. But the flow through of the septic effluent would be, because of the topography of the land, up to about 150 meters. So there's no chance that the effluent from that septic system will ever have an adverse impact on the lake. The other piece, the recommendation is our development agreement. Because the other aspect of nutrient impact on the lake is, in addition to what might flow under the ground, would be what flows over the ground in surface water. So there are certain recommendations that we've made also to ensure surface drainage won't have an adverse impact on the lake. And that's things like maintaining the shoreline in a natural vegetated state, with the exception of removing dead or diseased trees or a pathway to the lake, and the limbing of trees so that you can have a view. So that would be implemented through a development agreement that we applied for concurrently with the zoning application. I realize it's not a matter before council tonight, but I also understand that the bylaw under consideration tonight is not on the agenda, but will be considered by council at a subsequent meeting in July, which is fine. We've had an opportunity to look at the bylaw, and it's not exactly what we applied for, but it's fine. It looks fine. So if council sees fit to approve it at their next meeting, we'd be fine with that. We just ask that perhaps consideration be given to perhaps bringing forward the development agreement at the same meeting on July. And if we could have a chance to look at that agreement before it goes council, we'd appreciate an opportunity for that. And just one last note, we had quite a, how could I put it? A lot of interest in this application at the land division hearing, which is why we're here today. And it lasted at least an hour or more. And so what I'd like to just mention is that the purpose of this lot is in a category of what I call estate planning for the Smith family. And so there's no immediate plans for developing the retained land. There's an existing house on the lot to be severed. It's going to be 1 hectare. And on the retained land, there'll be a new dwelling allowed. But there's no short-term or even foreseeable future plans for developing a dwelling on it at this time. So they just want to get their estate set up for when, when the time comes to deal with the estate. So that's all I really have
We
to say.
understand. Yes. Thank you, Brian. I
Okay.
really appreciate you being there, and I apologize. I thought that this was pretty pro forma because there were no comments, no concerns, but I will make sure that I'm in the room on July 11th. My apologies again, but I really appreciate you and the children, for lack of a better term, of the applicant for being there. So thanks very much. I will tell our new members of council, land division is part of the county of Renfrew. And the reason it would have to go to land division was because of the official plan. So just a quickie there. Did you have anything else, Brian? You're good?
I'm good. Thank you, Mayor Murphy.
Excellent. Nice to see you, sir. Are there any questions or comments from members of council?
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead, John.
So Brian, looking at the larger parcel of land, that's the one that does have a building on it now. And going from the limited service residential and rural designations, what's the practical value of dropping the rural designation? Maybe you're not the right guy to ask that.
Dropping it or adding it?
Well, you're going from LSR and rural to LSR-EX. So you're dropping the rural portion of that 60 acres.
Actually, I thought it was reversed.
On the
Maybe I'm
draft,
misreading it wrong, sorry.
sorry,
Yeah.
that's what we had applied for, but on the draft bylaw that we received, it is going to an RU exception zone. Yeah, for the.
Okay, so it's an RU exception, not an
Yeah.
LSR.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
applied for LSR exception. But because the retained land actually has frontage on a public road, what's the name of the road?
Sutter's Way and.
Sutter's Way.
So up at the Ganser, there's 20 meters of frontage. So technically, it's an existing lot on a public road,
Okay,
even though it's,
and that change to RU exception is satisfactory. As you
it's
mentioned
fine, it's
earlier on.
fine with us.
Okay.
Yeah. Whether it's RU or LSR, it permits the same uses and pretty much has. In fact, the rural is probably a little bit more flexible on the uses that can be used on the property. So it's a good thing for the client.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from council? I see none. This therefore completes the public meeting process. Council will give careful consideration to the arguments for and or against the zoning amendment requested for this property. The bylaw will be brought forward to the July 11, 2023 meeting of council for consideration of passing. Should this bylaw be passed, a notice of passing will then be circulated as required under the Planning Act, and there would be an appeal period after the notice of passing was sent out of 20 days. Any person wishing to receive written notice of the adoption of the amendment being considered at this meeting must leave their name and mailing address with the township clerk in writing or use the chat function if attending by Zoom. As required by section 34, 14.5 of the Planning Act, council is required to inform the public of who is entitled to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal under sections 3411 and 19. Under section 3411, if council decides to refuse an application or refuses or neglects to make a decision on an application within 120 days of the municipal clerk receiving the application, the applicant or the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk of the municipality. Section 3419, not later than 20 days after the giving of notice of passing of the bylaw, the applicant, any person or public body who made oral submissions at the public meeting or made a written submission to council before the bylaw was passed, or the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal by filing an appeal with the clerk of the municipality. I now declare this public meeting closed at 5:34 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Those on Zoom, you gotta go log off and log back in.